My name is Ren Carter. My mother's birthday party was supposed to be a quiet afternoon, fruit tart, pastel napkins, and the same old stories we'd all heard before. Until my 10-year-old daughter Emily called me from inside that very house. Her voice trembled like wind slipping through a cracked window. "Mom, get out. Right now." I didn't ask a single question. I stood up immediately and walked out of the house that had held my entire childhood, and that was the last time I ever stepped inside. 3 months later, they called me every night, begging me to come back. But nothing could go back to the way it was, because what Emily heard that day made it impossible for me to ever look at my family the same way again. Have you ever had to run from your own flesh and blood? If this story makes you think, leave a comment, hit like, and subscribe to hear the next part. I'll tell you why. A child became the only protector her mother had. I'm the eldest of 2 sisters. My father, Ron, was once a firefighter, later a construction supervisor. My mother, Elaine, taught elementary school before leaving early to focus on taking care of the family. From the outside, our home looked like it lacked nothing. But I learned early on that in our family, roles weren't divided by fairness, they were divided by convenience. I was the one who could handle pressure. The one who was more resilient than my sister. Those phrases sounded like compliments, until I realized they were a way to justify putting everything on my shoulders. I started working at 15, bussing tables at a diner near school. On weekends I washed cars, and in the summer I worked at the library. Every time I brought home money, my mother smiled as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "We all pitch in," she'd say. "Everyone in the family has a responsibility." Nicole, my younger sister, was different. She took piano lessons, painted, went on church youth group trips, and was never once asked to earn money. One summer I asked my mom, "Why doesn't Nicole get a summer job? She's 15 too." My mother didn't hesitate, "She's sensitive. Not everyone is like you. You can handle hardship, she can't." I lost count of how many times I told myself, maybe I'm stronger, as a way to swallow the favoritism. My good grades, hard work, and obedience, the things that should have earned me love, became excuses to exploit me without limit. At 19, I earned a full scholarship to the state university, but my parents urged me to study closer to home. "So you can still help out around the house," Mom said. I refused. That was the first time I chose something for myself. I met Caleb in my second year of college, while working as a teaching assistant for an intro to psychology class. At first he wasn't remarkable, not the smartest, not the most charming, but he listened. And at the time what I lacked most was the feeling of being heard. Caleb said the things I'd always longed to hear from my family: "You've done enough. You deserve a break. You don't have to hold everything together." I thought maybe he'd be the one to see me not as someone always ready to sacrifice, but as someone worthy of gentleness. We married soon after I graduated. I became a structural design engineer at a large firm. Caleb worked freelance, drawing, blogging, and occasionally tutoring. At first I didn't mind. I was used to carrying the load. I figured if I was better at earning, it made sense for me to handle the finances. My mother even said, "With how capable you are, it's fine if your husband takes it easy. You're the one holding the whole family together." It sounded like praise, but beneath it was the same lesson I'd grown up with. I was obligated to be strong, so everyone else could be comfortable. Caleb was sweet in the beginning. He loved cooking, took me on evening walks, and left little notes in my purse. "Don't let anyone take your smile. I'm proud of you." But the notes stopped appearing. Home-cooked meals turned into requests for me to pick up takeout on my way home. Our walks became tense text exchanges if I worked late. Caleb didn't change overnight. He faded, like a row of lights going out one by one. When I was pregnant with Emily, he told me to cut back on work. I refused. He was upset, but then started telling friends I was a workaholic and hard to deal with when stressed. I didn't realize he was quietly shaping a different image of me until a coworker asked, "Are you okay? Caleb said you've been having severe insomnia and mental health struggles." I was stunned. I was fine. But Caleb had already planted the seeds. After Emily was born, things got worse. Caleb didn't spend time caring for her as promised. The day I came home from the hospital, he asked, "So, when are you going back to work?" I laughed, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. To him, the baby was my responsibility because I was better at it. Meanwhile, he kept blogging, lingering in coffee shops, and telling people, "My wife won't slow down." By the time Emily was 3, she feared the dark. At 4, she startled at sudden noises. At 5, she never smiled when her father came home. I saw it all. I knew it all. But I was buried in work and my mother still said, "He's a man, everyone has a temper sometimes." I nearly believed her, until one night Caleb threw a ceramic mug against the wall during an argument. The shards flew past Emily's face as she stood in the doorway. She froze, trembling, and dropped her stuffed animal. I knelt, pulled her into my arms, then looked at the man who once wrote me tender notes. There was nothing left to say. I packed our things, lifted Emily, and left in the night. The place I thought I'd never return to, my parents' house, became the only destination I had. I thought they'd welcome us. Stand by us. What I didn't expect was that the very same place was preparing another trap, this time even more dangerous. That night, I fled the house I once believed would be the safest place for Emily, not after a blow or blood, but after a mug shattered against the wall and my child stood frozen in the doorway. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She looked at me with eyes that no longer believed anyone would protect her. I grabbed my bag, pulled Emily close, and left that night. I left with a single bag and without a word to Caleb. I couldn't think of anything except getting out before something else broke. There was no one else I could go to right then, except my parents. I had once sworn I'd never go back to the house in North Seattle, the place I grew up, and the place I learned to swallow myself to be accepted. But in the middle of the night, with a sleeping child in my arms and nowhere else to turn, I had no choice. My mother opened the door, looking startled. "What is this? What's going on that you're calling me in the middle of the night?" "Mom, I need help. Just for a little while." She was silent for a beat, then stepped aside. "Bring her in. Nicole and the kids are asleep." My dad sat on the couch, muted the news, and gave a quiet nod. No questions, no embrace, but at least he didn't send me away. That was enough for me in that moment. The next day, I called in to quit my job. The one I had spent nearly 8 years building my name in. Part of me knew I wouldn't be back anytime soon. I couldn't manage night shifts, site meetings, or travel with a child who had barely begun to recover from trauma. Perhaps sensing that, Emily didn't question anything. She ate little, spoke softly, and clung to me constantly. I tried to make it feel like a short vacation, grandparents, a familiar kitchen, the backyard swing. But she didn't believe it. I could see it in the way she slept, curled up, head resting on her backpack instead of a pillow. At first, my mother seemed attentive, asking if I'd eaten, telling me to rest while she watched Emily for a little while. But that little while never lasted more than 10 minutes. Every time Emily began to tell a story or laugh loudly, my mother would sigh or quietly leave the room. Once, I went to the kitchen for yogurt and found my mother standing at the fridge, sighing at the food inside. "The house feels so full now," she murmured, "and this fridge is too small." I almost offered to buy a new one, then remembered, I wasn't in a position to. I was no longer the dutiful daughter who sends money every month. Nicole barely spoke to me. She swept in with clouds of perfume, always tired from wrangling her twins, but never once refused to have our mother watch them. I began to notice Emily was being pushed out of the family's little orbit. Her colorful, cheerful drawings, taped to the fridge in the morning, would be gone by noon. "Must have fallen," my mother said. But I knew Emily had used 4 pieces of tape. Another time, I saw her carrying a stuffed animal into the living room to play with the twins. Nicole glanced over, then smiled faintly at my mother. "Some kids just don't know when to keep quiet, huh?" Emily stood, turned silently, and went back to her room. I didn't say anything right then. Partly because I was tired. Partly because I didn't want to cause trouble, an old habit from my own childhood. But my daughter wasn't as blind as I used to be. That night, she climbed into bed, curled against my arm, and asked, "Mom, are we going to stay here long?" I hesitated. "Probably not, honey. This is temporary." She nodded, then whispered, "Because I don't think this place is home." Her words stopped me cold. In that moment, I realized Emily saw everything more clearly than I had at her age. And if I wasn't careful, she would learn to accept it the way I once had, as a survival tactic. I started looking for ways to manage. Took on small online drafting jobs, sold a few old items. Not much money, but I didn't want to ask for more. I understood now, here, kindness always came with conditions. And I was beginning to feel something worse than coldness brewing. Every time Emily left her room, there were side glances. Every time I spent too long texting, Nicole would ask, "Talking to a lawyer?" One night at dinner, my mother casually said, "Caleb seems to still care about the little one. He emails to check in all the time. Not every man does that after his wife leaves." I set my fork and knife down. "Mom, I didn't leave. I ran." My dad cleared his throat but stayed silent. My mother shrugged. "Well, depends on how you see it." I looked at Emily, fiddling with her spoon, eyes down. I knew that look. I had sat in that same seat at this very table, listening to adults minimize my pain, learning to believe I was exaggerating. This time I couldn't let it happen again. But I didn't yet know that what was lurking beneath was crueler than the coldness. I noticed nothing. No strange signs. That afternoon passed like any other in that house, the smell of grilled meat from the yard, the TV murmuring the news, the occasional laughter from the kitchen where my mother chatted with Nicole. I was on the back porch, finishing a drafting job for a small client. I thought Emily was in her room or reading somewhere. But in reality, she had slipped into the downstairs bathroom, one of the few quiet spots left. And there, she heard everything. Not a passing comment. Not a scrap of conversation. As I was typing the last line on my screen, my phone buzzed. Emily. Calling instead of coming to get me. Strange. I answered, and before I could say a word, her voice came, low, shaky, and cold. "Mom, get out of the house. Right now." I will never forget how she said it. Like someone had taught her, when your life might be in danger, don't explain, just act. We sat in the car, parked by an old, shuttered garden shop. Evening had fallen, the smell of earth and damp leaves heavy in the air. I still hadn't asked her anything. I only remember my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. "Can you tell me what happened?" I asked as gently as I could. She stared straight ahead into the dim blur of the streetlight on the windshield. I was in the bathroom. They didn't know. Grandma was talking to Grandpa and Aunt Nicole about sending me back to Dad. "What did they say?" She said, "You're not stable. That if you keep taking care of me, you'll get worn out and collapse." She said it's better for me to go back to Dad. Aunt Nicole said Dad has money. That if they help him, he'll take care of the family's finances. Then she said, if you refuse, they could put something in your bag. Just a little. Then call Child Protective Services for a surprise check. It felt like someone had punched me in the chest. "Are you sure, Emily?" I asked, my voice raw. I heard all of it. They were clear. They said, "She doesn't bring in money anymore, and now she's a burden. We have to do something." I glanced at the small backpack at her feet, a faded purple one she'd had since kindergarten. "Did you pack your things?" I asked. "I only grabbed a few. But I took your phone charger too." She held it out, neatly wrapped with a rubber band, like a child far too used to thinking one step ahead. I reached over and took her hand. It was still ice cold. "You're very brave," I whispered. "Where are we going now, Mom?" I didn't know. When I left home at 19 to go to college, I told myself, I will never come back unless I have no choice. And yet, I had come back, not because I had no choice, but because I still believed in something that no longer existed, unconditional kindness under one roof. Now I understood. They only wanted the useful version of me, the one who earned money, sent monthly support, paid for summer vacations, bought the espresso machine, covered the utility bills. The real me, the mother in pain, the woman who had lost her job, her marriage, and was trying to rebuild from zero, had no place there. And Emily, she saw it before I did. She was the one who protected me, while an entire network of adults plotted to erase me from my place as her mother. I turned the car around. We weren't going back. Not for another hour. That night I called Liam, my best friend from college. The only person I'd trusted since Caleb. He said one thing, "Move in. There's an empty room. And always an extra blanket." I looked at Emily. She leaned her head against the window, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. I whispered, "We're going to be okay, honey. I promise." I don't know if I believed it at the time. But I did know this, from that moment on I would never let anyone take my daughter from me again, not with violence, not with money, and certainly not with the betrayal of those who called themselves family. Liam lived in a second-floor apartment in an old brick building in the West End, quiet, a little worn, but clean and warm. We arrived close to midnight. I still remember. He opened the door wearing an oversized t-shirt, a steaming mug of tea in one hand. When he saw me and Emily, exhausted, carrying backpacks, hair tangled, eyes sunken, he stepped aside and said, "My room is yours. Both of you. I'll take the couch. There's ice cream in the freezer. Does Emily like vanilla?" That question, so ordinary it made me laugh. I didn't realize how long I'd been holding back tears until Liam mentioned ice cream. Emily gave a small smile. She glanced at me as if checking whether it was okay to feel safe. That night, we slept in Liam's slightly firm bed, in a room that smelled faintly of old books and pine. Emily pressed close to me, her hand gripping the edge of my nightshirt. I lay still, staring at the ceiling. I couldn't sleep, but I couldn't think clearly either. There was only the sound of the ceiling fan's slow click and my daughter's steady breathing, finally at rest. The next morning, Liam made breakfast. Pancakes with burnt edges, coffee so strong it felt like I was drinking rocket fuel. He wasn't great in the kitchen, but he had this odd habit, always waking early to cook for anyone who needed it. "Are you sure we're not imposing?" I asked, folding the clean laundry neatly stacked on the chair. Liam looked up from a pile of technical drawings. "Ren, freshman year, you let me crash at your place for 3 months when my apartment had mold." I smiled. "I remember. You never charged me rent. Because you cooked better than this back then." He pretended to be offended, tossing a dish towel lightly at me. Then his expression grew serious. "I mean it. Stay as long as you need. This is home. I'm not just saying that." There was something in Liam's eyes, a steady, quiet resolve, untouched by pity or pressure. A kind I had never seen in any other man. I started taking on freelance architectural jobs, designing homes, fixing plans, making 3D renderings. The money wasn't much, but it was mine. I worked at night when Emily slept. During the day, we studied together, painted, tidied the apartment. Small things, but somehow they made me feel more alive than I had in years. Emily began to change. No more flinching when someone spoke loudly. No more fear of the dark. She started laughing again, a real laugh, full and round, not the guarded smiles I'd seen at my mother's house. She liked drawing story sequences. The first ones were about a mother wolf leading her cub away from a poisoned den. Then came scenes of them building a new home atop a mountain, where the air was cold but clean. "She's using metaphors?" Liam asked, flipping through one of her sketchbooks. "She understands more than we think." But me, I never really relaxed. I was waiting. Not for a message, for a hit. A counterstrike. Because I knew my family. They weren't silent out of regret. They were silent when they were planning. 1 week. Then 2. Not a single text from my mother. No pretend check-ins from an aunt. No cozy dinner photos for social media, the kind she used to post to prove she was devoted. I even checked her old Facebook page, once updated daily with pictures of her grandkids and home-cooked meals. Quiet. As if she were, waiting for me to panic and come back on my own. "It's too quiet," I told Liam while sorting drawings on the dining table. He looked up. "That's a good thing. Good in movies, maybe." I met his eyes. In real life, when they're quiet, it's because they're preparing something dangerous. He thought for a moment, then rested a hand on my shoulder. "Then don't wait. Be ready." I knew he didn't mean fight back, he meant prepare. Because when people can't control you with words, they'll use other tools, laws, lies, the indifference of the system, and sometimes, even the memories you once believed were true. I clenched my fists. I wasn't afraid anymore. But I was on guard. I had left that toxic nest. But I had a child, and I wouldn't let anyone turn the clock back. Not once. That Thursday started like any other morning. The sky was gray, Seattle rain falling softly like it didn't want anyone to wake up. I was in the kitchen making coffee. Liam was crouched under the sink, trying to fix a leaky faucet from last week with a wrench barely bigger than his hand. Emily was brushing her teeth, humming a song she'd picked up from a video the day before. I remember smiling. It was a peaceful morning, so peaceful it felt suspicious. Then came the knock, firm, deliberate, each beat carrying the weight of authority. Liam wiped his hands on a towel and headed for the door. "Want me to get it?" he asked quietly. I nodded, my chest tightening for no reason I could explain. A woman stood outside wearing a long gray coat, clipboard in hand. Behind her was a man in his 40s, his eyes scanning the space over Liam's shoulder. "Good morning. I'm Stephanie Owens with Child Protective Services. We're here for a visit following an anonymous report." The words "anonymous report" hit me like a punch to the stomach. Stephanie looked at me, then glanced past me into the apartment. "You're Emily's mother, correct?" "Yes. What's going on?" "We've received information that the child is currently living in an unstable environment. No permanent residence, a mother showing signs of emotional instability, and residing with a man who is not a family member." She said each word slowly, clearly, as if reading charges. Liam stepped back, hands still damp. "I'm Ren's close friend. This is my apartment. She and Emily have been here since." Stephanie raised a hand to cut him off. "We'll be verifying all information. First, I need to speak with Emily alone." I felt the blood drain from my face. "She's getting ready for school. We need to speak with her now." "I'll get her." Emily stepped out of the bathroom, a smear of toothpaste on her collar. She froze when she saw the strangers in the living room. I tried to make my voice sound as normal as possible. "Emily, this is MS. Stephanie. She just wants to talk with you for a bit. Nothing serious." I saw her eyes flick quickly, panic flashing as if searching for an escape route. "You'll be fine," I murmured, squeezing her hand. Her palm was damp with sweat. They sat with Emily in the kitchen. Liam and I stayed in the living room. My hands clenched so tightly I felt each knuckle ache. "We've done nothing wrong, Ren," Liam said softly. "You don't understand. With them, all it takes is a well-told story. I've seen it before. I know they'll use anything to prove I'm an unfit mother." He started to say something, but the kitchen door opened. Stephanie stepped out. "Emily shows no signs of physical harm. The home is clean, safe. There's food in the fridge. Basic needs are being met." She paused, then continued, "We'll note that follow-up may be necessary, but for now there's no cause for intervention." "Thank you." The man with her scanned the room once more, then nodded to Stephanie. They left, the door closing behind them. Emily came out of the kitchen quietly, hands clasped tight. I bent down and pulled her into my arms. She trembled in waves. "I'm okay," Emily whispered, barely audible. I told the truth. I led her to the bedroom, tucked her in. She wouldn't let go of my hand. I sat there, humming a vague melody my mother used to sing, the one thing she left me that I could still keep. When Emily finally slept, I stepped into the bathroom. I looked at myself in the mirror, pale face, dark circles, hair a mess. That night I sat with Liam in the kitchen. He handed me a glass of water and placed a hand on my back. "I don't know what to do to help you." "You already are. You're here." I tightened my grip on the glass of water in my hands. In my mind I had already started arranging everything: old records, scanned copies of Emily's school transcripts, lists of her doctors, receipts for child support payments from years past. Evidence. If they wanted to fight dirty, I would fight with the truth. Because if they thought I would crumble after one inspection, they had forgotten one thing: I was no longer the obedient daughter they could bend to their will. The courtroom that morning was colder than I expected. On the plaintiff's bench, I clutched the edge of my dress, trying to still my shaking knees. Liam, behind me, was silent and steady as a wall. Beside me, Emily's small hand rested in mine, her heartbeat racing like a drum. Caleb walked in first, gray suit pressed, hair slicked back, a smile so polite it was almost fake. He glanced around, caught my eye, and tilted his head slightly as if this were some friendly reunion between old acquaintances. Then my parents arrived. My mother wore a pale cream skirt suit, as if she were attending a distant cousin's wedding. My father followed, posture stiff, expression blank. Nicole came last, holding a notebook, probably her witness notes to make things look organized. When the judge entered, everyone stood. I still remember the sound of his shoes striking the hardwood, sharp, rhythmic, like a warning that from this moment on, feelings had no place here. The first part of the hearing, Caleb's lawyer spoke, requesting full custody of Emily on the grounds that I was mentally unstable, without a permanent residence, had an unstable income, and was living with an unrelated man. I didn't react. I'd heard those words before, in whispers, in rumors, in suspicious glances. But this time they were spoken in open court, recorded in transcripts, with a judge parsing every word. Then came their witnesses. My mother was called first. She stood at the witness stand, hand lightly on the Bible, voice calm as if she were delivering an old Sunday sermon. My daughter tends to be very emotional. Since childhood, she's been easily swayed by her feelings. I believe under her current stress she's no longer in control of herself. She called me my girl, as if I were a 6-year-old throwing a tantrum, not a single mother who had fought to keep her child safe night after night. My father was shorter in his testimony. Ren has a temper. When she lived with us, she was quiet but unsettled. She never shared anything. Then he turned to the judge. Caleb is calm. Having lived with her, I believe he understands her better than anyone. Nicole rose last, walking like she was the star witness in a criminal trial. My sister doesn't listen. And Emily needs a father who can correct her behavior. Caleb is the most patient man I've ever met. She even teared up. I want my niece to have stability, to live in a real family. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. I kept still, nails digging into my palms. Liam's hand rested lightly on my shoulder. Any more witnesses for the plaintiff? The judge asked. My attorney stood. Yes, Your Honor. We'd like to call our witness Emily Carter. I turned to my daughter. Emily rose and walked slowly toward the stand. She wore the pale blue dress we'd picked out together last weekend. Her hair was neatly tied back, though a few strands had escaped to frame her face. Small, delicate, but her steps were steady. The judge gave her a gentle smile. Do you know why you're here today? I want to stay with my mom. Her voice didn't shake. Why do you choose your mom? Emily took a breath, then said, because she listens to me. And she makes me feel safe. When I'm with her, I'm not scared. A hush fell over the room. And your father? She hesitated. Dad gets mad. He throws things. One time he threw a water bottle. It didn't hit anyone, but it was loud. I was scared. I saw my mother freeze in her seat. Nicole rolled her eyes. Caleb remained motionless, gripping the armrest. Have you ever heard anyone else talk about changing who takes care of you? I heard my grandma, grandpa, and Aunt Nicole say they'd make my mom lose custody. What else did they say? They said they'd put something in my mom's bag to get her in trouble. So I'd have to live with Dad again. Because Dad promised to pay them back. Caleb's lawyer half rose as if to object, but sat down when the judge lifted a hand. Are you certain? Emily met his eyes, her own shining with a strength I didn't think a 10-year-old could hold. I heard it clearly. I was in the bathroom. The door was closed, but I heard every word. Thank you, Emily. You're very brave. She returned to me and gripped my hand, like she had that rainy day in the car. The room stayed silent, as if still listening to the truth that had been spoken. And in that moment I knew, though the trial wasn't over, my daughter had already reclaimed the voice the adults had tried to take from her. For most of the hearing I stayed silent beside my lawyer, but when it came time to present evidence, I didn't hold back. I slowly opened the black document case in front of me. Your Honor, the defense would like to submit financial records and supporting evidence, my lawyer said, his voice calm but cutting. I started with what couldn't be denied, bank statements from nearly 8 years, showing regular monthly transfers from my account to my parents' account, plus direct payments to Caleb during our marriage. I laid it out clearly, each statement marked and highlighted, monthly payments for my parents' utilities and car insurance, all in their names but paid by me, the full cost of the 2017 Disney trip for 6, including airfare, hotel, and meals, the Hawaii vacation my mother liked to call a family gift, funded entirely from my quarterly bonus, and most recently the Oregon beach trip 2 years ago. The one where Caleb posted photos captioned, "Enjoying the life I built for myself." I didn't have to add anything. The numbers spoke for themselves about who had really built that life. The judge studied each packet closely. His brows knit when my lawyer moved to the next section, Caleb's undisclosed financial holdings. We had worked with a private forensic accountant. And through a series of searches, they found Caleb had a secondary investment account in Arizona, opened before our divorce, never declared in the division of assets. It held nearly $83,000. When my lawyer stated the amount, Caleb blinked. For the first time in the trial, he looked truly unsettled. Can you explain why you failed to disclose this? The judge asked, eyes still on the file. Caleb swallowed hard. I didn't think it was marital property. My lawyer interjected, it was opened during the marriage. Caleb said nothing. His lips pressed thin. Behind him, my parents remained stone-faced. Nicole stared at her lap, fingers twisting her sleeve. And then the final blow came. Not from me, but from a stranger. During the short recess, when the judge stepped out, a woman sitting in the row behind me, someone I didn't recognize, stood and handed the court clerk a small USB drive. "There's a recording that needs to be reviewed," she said. "It relates to the testimony of the minor witness, and it may help verify the plaintiff's credibility." The clerk frowned, asking briefly about its origin. The woman replied, "I'm a former neighbor of Ron and Elaine. I accidentally recorded it while they were talking on their porch. I was going to delete it, but after hearing today's proceedings, I couldn't stay silent. I never learned her name. And I might never see her again. But she was the one who helped bring the truth into the light." The next day, the recording was played in court, with the judge's special permission. I heard my mother's voice clear as day. "She thinks she's clever. Lost her job and still clinging to that kid. As long as Caleb wins, everything will be back to normal." "Yeah," her father said, "let's just call CPS first. One shot and she'll back off." Then Nicole's dry laugh. "If not, we can slip something small into her bag. Who's gonna know?" When the recording ended, the judge rested his forehead in his hand for a few seconds. Then he said, "The court cannot, and will not, allow this child to be placed in the care of those who conspired to strip her custodial parent of her rights through deceit, manipulation, and abuse of the law. And the father, Caleb, not only acted unethically, but also deliberately concealed assets during the division of property. Therefore, full custody will be granted to Ms. Ren Carter with no visitation rights. The maternal family, Ron, Elaine, and Nicole, will be prohibited from any contact until further court order." A few days later, the recording leaked online, not from me. But it was too late to hide. People heard my mother's voice, once a retired teacher respected by the entire neighborhood. My father's voice, a former construction supervisor who loved preaching morals. And Nicole's voice, the mother of two who liked posting parenting lessons online. They were no longer invited to community board meetings. The corner grocery refused to let Elaine run a tab. My cousin from Kansas called me, her voice breaking. "If I had known what they did sooner, I wouldn't have stayed silent all this time." Silence isn't an option anymore. The first morning in our new home, I woke to the sound of gentle waves outside the window. Sea breeze slipped through the cream linen curtains, carrying salt and sand into the little kitchen where Liam was fussing with the old coffee pot he refused to throw away. Emily had been up for a while. I heard the scratch of a pen on paper. She was on the porch with her sketchbook, working on the next chapter of her story. I quietly sat beside her. "What's this chapter about, Em?" I asked, resting a hand on her shoulder. Without looking up, she smiled. "Still the mother wolf. But this time, she's not looking back at the old den. She's building a new one. On the beach." She looked up then, her drawing still unfinished, but her eyes already complete. "This den isn't for hiding. It's for staying." Sounds a lot like where we are. That's because it is. Our new house wasn't big, 2 bedrooms, a small office, a backyard of wild daisies, and a path that led straight to the beach. It wasn't grand, but it was ours. The architecture firm I joined was young but serious. They reached out after reading a blog post I wrote, "Architecture and Healing Spaces for Single Mothers." They didn't want me as an architect, they wanted me to design a new line of homes specifically for mothers who had left toxic environments. And what made me say yes wasn't the salary, it was when the lead designer, a woman in her 50s, called me directly and said, "We don't need you to leave your child to prove you're capable. We want you to work because of the story you've lived." As for Liam, he never once asked me, "What are we?" His presence was the clearest answer in the world. He quietly installed window latches so Emily wouldn't be startled by night winds. He let her win half their Mario Kart races, but also lost for real a few times so she'd know she wasn't being patronized. He learned to bake oat muffins, Emily's favorite, something I'd never had the time to do. Once, I overheard Emily whispering to her old doll in the corner of her bed, "I think Uncle Liam's a dad wolf. But the gentle kind. Mom's still the mom wolf. But she doesn't growl anymore." I turned away so she wouldn't see me smile and blink too fast. We never called ourselves a family. But one evening, while I was putting clothes away, Emily walked in holding a drawing, 3 wolves sitting together on a hill, facing the ocean with a full moon at their backs. I drew this for you, she said. I brushed her hair back. And who's this one? I pointed to the tallest wolf, one paw resting on a rock. That's Uncle Liam. But I gave him soft ears so nobody mistakes him for a real wolf. Liam had been leaning in the doorway the whole time. He didn't say a word, but I saw him lower his head slightly, as if to hide something gentle in his eyes. At night, after Emily was asleep, Liam and I sat on the wooden porch steps, sipping mint tea and listening to the waves. Sometimes we didn't speak at all. Sometimes silence itself held meaning, a silence without schemes, without waiting for harm, without the need to brace for impact. Do you think we deserve this peace? I asked. I think we chose this peace. And no one has the right to take it back. That weekend the sky was unusually clear, as if even the air was holding its breath before something yet to come. I was slicing oranges in the kitchen, making juice for breakfast, when I heard a car stop out front. Liam looked at me. Want me to check? I shook my head. No need. I'd lived long enough to recognize a knock before it came. And sure enough, I stepped out of the kitchen. Emily was already in the hallway, still holding her sketchbook, her face neither surprised nor afraid. I rested a hand on her shoulder. You don't have to open it if you don't want to. But I want to. I stepped back so she could open the door. Standing on our porch were 3 people I once called family. My mother wore a white sweater, holding a tray of still warm pastries. My father lingered slightly behind, his posture tilted and eyes avoiding mine. Nicole clutched a sealed envelope, smiling like she hoped someone would invite her in. Hello, sweetheart, my mother said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. We don't want to cause trouble. We just came to say we're sorry. She extended the tray toward Emily. Almond pastries, the kind you loved that I used to make for the holidays. Emily didn't take her eyes off them. She didn't look at the pastries. Or the envelope. She looked into each of their eyes, as if searching for anything left of the people who once filled her small world. I don't hate you, Emily said, her voice quiet but each word clear. I've already forgiven you. My mother paused. Something flickered in her eyes, hope, maybe relief. Emily went on, still gentle. But we're not family anymore. The words landed on the wooden porch like a slow wind no one could stop. I stayed silent behind her, not stepping in. My mother tried to keep her smile, but her lips began to tremble. Nicole held out the envelope, but Emily shook her head. What I needed I've already taken back, she said. You can't give it to me. My father took the first step down the porch, turning quietly toward the car. Nicole followed, shoulders slightly hunched, gaze unfocused. My mother lingered a moment longer. She set the pastry tray on the railing, straightening it as if still clinging to the role of grandmother. We were wrong, she said. I know. She stepped down. Emily closed the door. I knelt to her height, wrapping her in my arms. She said nothing, just rested her head on my shoulder and let out a soft sigh, as if finally breathing out an old sadness. I felt her warmth, felt my arms holding the one thing I would never let slip away, not through legal battles, not through arguments, but through quiet persistence. Through every day, every meal, every night's sleep without fear, every tear wiped away without telling her to stop. I once thought losing your blood family was the worst thing that could happen to a single mother. But after everything, I understood that worse than losing them was losing yourself just to keep people who never chose to stay. And Emily, my daughter, was the first one brave enough to name that truth. Maybe everyone who hears this will feel something different. For me, this isn't a story about loss or breaking ties. It's about choosing what's right for yourself and the ones you love, even if it means letting go of relationships you once thought you couldn't live without. Family, sometimes it's not where you're born, but where you are safe to be yourself. And sometimes forgiveness doesn't mean going back, it's simply the way you move forward without carrying the weight of resentment. What about you? Do you think that, in some cases, leaving is the only way to protect love and peace? I'd truly like to hear your thoughts in the comments. If this story resonates with you, follow the channel so you don't miss more everyday but deeply meaningful stories about family, love, and the hard choices we all may face in life.